Here's the saddest thing of all, by the way. I've pointed this out previously, but like, it actually has gone over the Rubicon, Monte. It's gone over the line where, like, it's not actually that funny, that TSM shit, because they're just really bad now. And there's no real. And here's the other thing: there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no way they get out of this, as far as I can tell. Like, people don't get it. I genuinely do. Like, they have to be relevant for it to be funny, their shit. If they actually do become like CLG and they're just a bottom feeder, who cares at that point? Like, it's not even. The joke is we won't even bother mentioning them anymore. Eventually, we'll just stop. Like, it just won't even matter, will it?
No, and we discussed this before. It's, half their fans already left with Bjergsen. And then I assume a few more of the Reggie apologists finally got it through their heads that his behavior is not worth cheering on, even though it took a fucking decade of video evidence. I guess maybe for some people, it finally dawned on them that they shouldn't be supporting this org. But yeah, I think TSM is in a very bad shape. Apparently, they got rid of one of their coaches as well. The players that they recruited don't seem to be integrating very well into the team. If we look at the C9 TSM game that happened yesterday, I would have thought that TSM, like, first off, I think the whole thing is just extremely confusing what they're doing, because they play 2 Enchanter tops for Huni this week, which just, I think, goes to show that they don't understand or don't care who Huni is as a player, because he's not the player I would put on Enchanter top laners. Not to say he can't do it, but I think that when you have a lot of new players and communication issues on the team, playing like very complex strategies like that, and not putting Huni in a position to carry and trying to all in on tactical. And by the way, they should have lost both of the games. I think that happened this past weekend.
No, just the idea that their game plan is to all in on tactical.
Yes. By the way, which is also just insane, guys.
That's where we're at. That's where we're at in 2022. You're all in on tactical.
Remember that Tactical is the player that was replaced by Team Liquid for Hans Sama, which obviously who wouldn't do that? That's just a straight upgrade, right? If you have the available position to put an import into. But if you're in a position where Tactical, you believe that Tactical doing 70% of your team's damage on Jinx is the best way to win a game, these are dire fucking straits for TSM, guys. Like, that's... Dude,
I said this when he was actually on Team Liquid, but when he was actually considered like a prospect, when he replaced Doublelift. But I even said, he's playing with fire already, Monty, if you know the power of names, that he calls himself Tactical, and he plays a role where you cannot int. Right, you are begging for the meme gods to slap you down. And then what does it turn out? His biggest flaw as a player is he fucking ints all the time. Except the joke is it's never a tactical int. It's just an int, isn't it? Like, give me a break. And then also, I made this point before, Monty, but other people won't appreciate this because they didn't follow the League of Legends game long enough. Famously, I always used to say that the dumb thing about Reggie is he didn't even exploit a loophole he had where he had Bjergsen grandfathered in as an NA resident, and he didn't even stack the team with 2 imports every year. He had a couple where he tried, like Sven and Mithi, but aside from that, he would usually waste an import slot. And one of the reasons, famously, you remember this, he used to say for years he didn't want Korean imports. He didn't believe that you should essentially bring them in because you have to speak a different language, blah, blah, blah. Now, the joke is, his team was the least successful out of all the major Western teams, even the ones that signed bloody Koreans like Cloud9. And then even better than that, you wait all those years, you don't sign Koreans during the period that, by the way, Koreans are straight fire, like season 5 to season 7. Then you go, actually, fuck it, sign Sawdark because he speaks Chinese and so does Lena. Oh, Lena's left, just sign more Chinese player. What even is this? So you waited 10 years. And then at the end, when you could have had Piglet, actually fucking good Asian players, you're just signing no-namers from China. Now you don't even have Lena, which was the whole angle that apparently she spoke Chinese. Like, I don't even know what this team is. The reason why I find it so sad, Monty, is because if people don't know, I actually think Kays, who's like their general manager or whatever now, I think he actually is a really good mind for the game.
Yes,
but I really wonder, does he have any input? Like, what is he working with when he's in this team? Because these don't feel like players he would sign, mate.
They said they did this whole scouting thing in China, but like you're saying, so here's the thing. I think what we're seeing now is how hard Bjergsen was propping up TSM, not only in terms of his own play, but drawing other players into the organization. Because as we can see, when left to their own devices, the GMing of TSM, like their GM literally just quit.
Yes.
And they apparently were doing these boot camps, over in Asia where they were testing all these players during the offseason. And for this to be the result, even though Spica, their jungler, is bilingual, it's inconceivable that an org with the resources of TSM just shits out a roster like this one. And there really isn't any hope. Like you have a Huni in the top lane who's notoriously streaky, who's notoriously unreliable. Sure, he's got great highs, but he also has extremely low lows. And you have Tactical, who has never displayed great carryability. And then you have Spica, who's coming off, an MVP performance, but certainly hasn't looked like who is Spica propping up on this roster? Like, even if he's great, there's got to be somebody to carry these games, and it's not Spica on Udyr, I'll tell you that. So then you just have this revolving support players, Shenyi being randomly benched, and then inexplicably, by the way, with an announcement that doesn't even really tell you what's going on, because it's like, I need a fucking Rosetta Stone to understand the English language that they're trying to use to tell me what's going on with the team. Is it permanent? Is it temporary? What the hell is actually going on? It feels like there's no plan and there's no management within this team. And the people who made the decisions about this roster are gone, right? And the difference is, while LS probably made the decisions about the current C9 roster, at least the pieces of the C9 roster are individually good. Like, this is a team that you could see how good Summit is in their game against TSM. And you know what? I thought TSM might actually win that game, not only because of the actually, I should rephrase this. It wasn't a massive lead. It was a massive kill lead. It was only about a 1,200 gold lead in the early game, which isn't really sufficient to cover up how much money Summit was getting on the Camille. But you could also see the difference between the Immortals game and the Cloud9 game, between Revenge's Camille and Summit's Camille. Summit is, he knows the limits of the champion a lot better. He was willing to push them a lot more. The way he ended that game was fucking spectacular from an individual play perspective, when he was pressuring the Nexus, diving the Rise, maximizing the pressure, then just recall TPing right back into the fight at the Dragon. He played it extremely well. And I thought TSM might win, because I was thinking, well, this is probably a good strategy to use against C9 when they don't necessarily they went through this turmoil of their head coach moving over, and they have a roster that can't fully communicate with each other based on the Korean and English. And it is hard to make very fast decisions in a weird meta where, it's basically kind of like a lane swap. And Summit obviously has probably played those before. Revenge, not so much, which probably was another factor. But you look at this scenario and you say, okay, this requires significant communication from Cloud9. I'm not sure if they're up to the task against, with their mixed language roster, with their coach just leaving, and they still pulled it out. So that actually gave me more respect and hope for C9 moving forward, because I think that's about as tough as it's going to get for them.
Yes, it is absolutely done, though. But who gives a fuck at this point? Luckily, here's the good news. As mad as it is, like, on the one hand, I'll be honest, narratively it does suck, because they obviously were like the evil empire, weren't they? But I will say, luckily, and this might sound like a crazy statement to say, but LCS doesn't need TSM anymore. They don't. Like, at this point in time, they don't need them to attract talent. The talent already goes to all the teams in LCS. They don't need it in terms of, like, they're a huge... Everyone has fucking investment in LCS. In fact, if you look in a world where we've got 100 Thieves, Cloud9, Team Liquid, Evil Genius, like, mate, that's it. That's all we need. You don't need 3 teams for Worlds. Those 4 teams can decide amongst themselves. And then there's even the outside world where maybe a Dignitas or someone can just get it together and be a dark horse. Like, at this point, it would have been really brutal if 3 or 4 years ago TSM was this shit. It actually doesn't matter now, boys. I'm telling you, it doesn't really matter.
Especially since, EG, it seems like they're finally getting their brand identity under control, which was kind of a disaster for a number of years. They weren't really leaning into, I think, their strengths. It feels like they're doing that a lot better right now. FlyQuest's branding, I think, it's not my favorite, but they have an identity that they've been cultivating over time. And, I think they're just other teams that are frankly like more fun and more interesting. And TSM doesn't even have really, I speak as like really their only, I guess Huni's a good personality too, but it just feels like they're not very forward with those personalities on the team. And, I've said this before, but when your brand identity is winning and winning goes away, you better have fucking something else to fall back on. And they don't. They have nothing. They, their brand identity right now is pretty negative, given the investigation that's going on with their ownership and the information that's come out from the team. And
by the way, there's something we could even get into as well. One thing I do hate in League is people love to take narratives, and when they sort of sex the narrative up, they then forget and make it reality. So people act, Monte, like Reggie's some marketing genius, and he knew how to sort of like, essentially they try to make him sound like when Floyd Mayweather became like fucking, when he switched from being like Money Mayweather, where he was just like an up and coming really good fighter, to like where he essentially is a troll now, and he tries to make it so that either you watch him because you think he's the best, or you watch him because you want to see him lose. That's like his whole gimmick, right? People act like that's what Reginald was doing the whole time. He isn't, and here's how you know. Because if he was, this is exactly when actually, Reginald, you don't take a step back. The years when you had really good teams is when you take a step back and you delegate. Now, if anything, Reginald should be front and center. Like, if I were him for real, I would actually use this to make that why people care about TSM. I'd be like, I picked this team myself. In fact, I scouted the shit. I'd do that angle. I'd make it so there's some reason for people to watch. Because at the moment, that's essentially the problem is, like I said, TSM just aren't relevant, mate. Who gives a fuck? It's just a bad team with a bunch of players that have shown no promise that just probably won't be very good. Basically, the only players to care about, as you said, is Speaker and Huni. And even then, I don't really care that much about Huni anymore, mate. Like, in LCS, okay, he's all right. But, like, I've seen him play internationally, mate. I don't really give a fuck about him going to Worlds or MSI. So, yeah, the team's just irrelevant at this point. And the reason why it is sad, though, I will say, is because if they'd actually had their shit together and this whole LS thing hadn't happened, this on paper, if TSM was a good team, could be one of the best LCS splits ever. Like, you could have four, as it said, like, could go 4 or 5 teams deep for the champion. Whereas instead, we're probably going to go like 2 teams deep, if not 1, and it'll probably end up not being as good, right? Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.